house. Virgo is kind of a fascinating house because to me it's well, not a house, but a sign in the 6th house is fascinating as well. So the reason for this is because the energy is a transitional energy. What I mean by a transitional energy has to do with the fact that the first 5 houses, so Aries through Leo, tend to be very sort of subjective in experience, or more about sort of developing the ego in a lot of ways, and the ego's, I guess, relationship with the material plane. So as we get into the 6th house into Virgo, there's a humbling that happens, and that humbling, it's actually a really fascinating process, and I hope to kind of describe it, because you can keep in mind that I'm doing these videos, I do them from the perspective of an evolutionary standpoint. So we're talking about essentially moving from immature Virgo energy to more mature Virgo energy. And that basically moves from essentially, well, let me go ahead and read some of the other characteristics, and then I'll get into the evolutionary aspect. So we're talking about crisis-prone, self-effacing, shy, timid, forgiving, but also critical, busy, good organization skills, service-oriented routines, and work. All these are kind of mixed up in the sort of 6th house Virgo energies. Now, Virgo, when they're immature, is essentially what it is it's moving from Leo energy into Virgo, which is, again, Leo was very, very, very focused on sort of the pinnacle of material achievement in a lot of ways, is what you see with Leo. So with Virgo, there's this humbling that happens, and the humbling happens to happen due to what I consider crisis and chaos. What I mean by crisis and chaos actually lies in the root of fear, and the root of fear and insecurity, which for Virgo, we're talking about the root chakra. So the root chakra is kind of the seat of where our fears and our insecurities and you know, self-esteem issues, things like that, feeling safe on the planet, all these things rise out of the root. So for Virgo, when they're immature, there's this chaotic energy to fill one's life full of stuff. And it could be stuff, but it also could be ideas, it could be experiences, it could be a number of different things. But the point is that they have to maintain this busyness. So they're going to be busy, they're going to be active, going to getting things done all the time. So accumulating things. So the statement that I kept reading is that Virgo is afraid of the void. They're afraid of open space. They're, you know, I'm not saying they're like, what's the term, agoraphobic? but it's the idea that where there's a void, they got to fill it. So if there's silence, let's say, in a conversation, they have to talk in order to fill that silence. And it's the same thing with their physical space. Now, all this is very instinctual, but again, it always goes back to what are we avoiding when we're active? What are we avoiding when we're constantly externalizing our life force and our energy? I'm by the lake, just in case you're curious what the crashing sounds are. Let's see if I can do this without my webcam shutting off. All right. So yeah, the externalizing of one's energies are, to me, actually really, really fascinating, because I've done it myself, and I think most of us have, but ultimately it's because we're, again, afraid of the void in this particular case, which is when you go into meditation, you're ultimately confronted with all those, I guess, attributes, or what you think your ego is comprised of. Like you know, there's a practice actually where you get like your driver's license, and you have your name on there, and you have your weight, and you have your eye color, and you have all these things. So you as a practice, you say, I am not my name, I am not blue-eyed, I am not this, I am not that. And what the practice is attempting to do is to move you towards the void. Now, the void isn't necessarily a bad thing, because the void in a lot of ways also represents the totality of all creation. They're actually one and the same. And without getting too esoteric, let me go ahead and explain the driver's license practice a little more. So as you're sort of taking apart all these areas that you identify yourself as, you start to, well, a couple things is, one, you start to find where you attach too much meaning or importance to certain aspects of your personality, and you can see if I'm attaching some aspect of if I'm attaching importance to some aspect of my personality, it's going to contain energy in some particular way. If you're ego-driven and you're living in life through ego, essentially your energy will continue to be externalized, and you'll keep filling your life full of external things. So ideologies, experiences, material things, etc., ideas, whatever it is. So what ends up happening with Virgo is they realize there's no satisfaction. So the humbling for Virgo has to do with the fact that I'm instinctually trying to get all this stuff, but it's not leading me anywhere. So essentially what's happening is that Virgo is learning to ultimately, again, it's functioning initially from the root. Root is adrenalized energy, it's instinctual energy, it's driven energy. So as they stop identifying with the fear, with the insecurity of not having stuff and things and ideas and whatever, then what ends up happening is they start using discernment, and then the great purge begins. So the great purge with Virgo has to do with, this stuff wasn't working for me, right? Like these ideas weren't working for me. This pattern of living isn't working for me. This job isn't working for me. Again, the dissatisfaction and the critical nature starts to serve Virgo at this point. And that critical nature is, I guess the big challenge at this point is, how do we not let our critical nature, let's say, interrupt our personal relationships and things like that? Again, like, how can we fall into a deeper, more accepting place? But again, in this particular phase, Virgo needs to be critical. So this is where the critical activity, where you start to decide, I'm going to purge this person, that person, I'm going to, again, whatever it is they're getting rid of, their work, their ideas, it could be anything, health practices. So now we're going to look a little bit at the 6th house. So the 6th house is the house of work, routine, and service. And also kind of like health matters, because health matters kind of falls into the idea of routine. So it makes total sense that these are the attributes associated with the 6th house, or Virgo, because this is about discernment. This is about that really intense drive that existed before. So we're talking about houses 1 through 5, that intense drive for the ego to establish itself on the material plane. Now it's like, oh, something's not working here. I'm not having any satisfaction. There's no joy. There's no love. I feel cut off. I feel like airy and in my head. So what ends up happening is that they start to realize that these things aren't working, and as they start to clean things up and declutter their life, they start to find space for the correct health practices, the correct individuals, the correct job. And what they really find out ultimately is, how can I, because this humbling, it's so impressive, they start to be able to objectively see how the individual, the ego, can humble itself and to serve humanity. And again, this is very earthly service. This is very rooted service. This is very grounded service. So it's not just about, Virgo being a mutable sign when they're immature. They're trying to adapt to everything. They adapt to sexual situations, they adapt to this, they adapt to that, and again, it's all about gathering experiences. There's no flaws in this, and there's no mistake. The only mistake is if you fail to grow, if you fail to recognize that there's, something didn't turn out the way you wanted, and it's like, oops, but can you see the growth in that situation, even though it didn't turn out the way you wanted? Inevitably, if you're objective and you're self-reflective, you can. So all that self-consciousness that tends to be associated with Virgo, that self-consciousness is self-reflection. That is, that's actually what makes their lives in a lot of ways worth living, and is because they start to really find out what matters. So Virgo, I'm trying not to keep this too esoteric. I guess the ultimate soul's expression of this sign is to, I'm not saying total self-sacrifice, right? You get that with Pisces. But actually, Pisces and Virgo being on the same sort of polarity, well, essentially being polarities on the same axis, in a lot of ways you get self-sacrifice on either side. Pisces, it's self-sacrifice for like this broader spiritual, essentially merger into the totality, whereas with Virgo, though, it's about that sort of learning to sacrifice one's ego desires in order to, and this is key, the soul of Virgo is the moon. So keep that in mind. The soul of Virgo is the moon. What does that mean? It means, Virgo, you're here to nurture humanity. You're here to nurture in your everyday relationships. You're here to nurture, but you can't do this until you figured your own shit out, right? You have to have used that discernment that Mercury, your ruler, has granted you. Once you can use that discernment, you got your, you get your life in order. You start using that gift, that perfectionist gift that you have, which can be a little annoying, particularly again when you're sort of going through this process of refining. But as you start to see that perfectionism, you start to become very, very defined in terms of like how you're going to express your energy, and again it becomes this like that perfectionism becomes something that really, really, really aids you. Because again, it's about perfecting the use of your energy, perfecting your health routines, perfecting your job choices, perfecting your home environment. And again, all in the end for the purposes of nurturing humanity, obviously nurturing yourself, and again, nurturing all those that come into your life, and nurturing, yeah, like I said, it all along your path, all situations. So I think that's all I want to mention about Virgo, the 6th house. Like I said, this is it really is transitional energy. And with all that said, I appreciate you watching this video. And if you're interested in any chart readings or chart interpretations, my website is posted down below this video. Feel free to reach out. Thank you much.